Why would anyone fear happiness? At first, it seems absurd. Happiness is the prize we are told to chase from our very first breath. It is the promise behind every effort, the reward whispered in stories, the invisible measure of a life well lived. We devote ourselves to it, sacrifice for it, and build our identities around it, believing that joy, comfort, and satisfaction will finally make us whole. Yet for Immanuel Kant, happiness was not a blessing to be pursued blindly. It was a danger, a subtle, insidious force that lures us into dependence, obedience, and ultimately, weakness. Kant saw something most people ignore, that happiness, in its seductive simplicity, carries a quiet tyranny. Each fleeting pleasure, each moment of comfort, ensnares us in invisible chains. The more we chase it, the more we tie ourselves to circumstance, to fortune, to the moods of others, and even to the whims of our own restless minds. Happiness whispers the promise of freedom, yet in its pursuit we surrender our autonomy. It convinces us that we are masters of our lives, when in reality we are captives of desire. His philosophy is a cold mirror, reflecting back an uncomfortable possibility. That joy might be nothing more than a distraction, a siren song that keeps us from confronting what truly matters. While the world tells us to follow our hearts, to seek pleasure, to avoid discomfort, Kant urges us to look deeper. He asks us to examine the price we pay for every smile, every fleeting thrill, every sense of satisfaction. Because if morality is the measure of a life, then happiness cannot be allowed to dictate the terms. For Kant, morality demanded more than pleasure. It demanded vigilance, discipline, and courage. The courage to act not out of desire, but out of duty. It required us to question whether the very thing we worship, the thing we spend our lives chasing, could also be a cage. And it is in that tension between the allure of joy and the call of duty that Kant's thought confronts us with a stark, unyielding truth. The life we are chasing, the life we think will bring freedom, may not be the life worth living at all. So, pause and consider. Are you living for happiness, or are you living for something higher? Are your choices guided by fleeting delight, or by the weight of what is right? Kant would say that the difference is everything. From the moment we are children, the lesson is drilled into us. Happiness is the goal. We are told to study hard so we can secure a career, to build relationships so we can feel loved, to chase comfort so we can finally rest. A good life, by every common measure, is simply the accumulation of happy moments. Smiles, pleasures, victories. The quiet assurance that things turned out well. But for Kant, this image was not just naive, it was dangerous. He did not deny that happiness feels good. What he denied was its power to ground a life. To him, happiness was not liberation, but entrapment, because it places our worth in the hands of forces beyond our control. Happiness, as most people define it, is bound up with desire. We want food, warmth, security, recognition. We want intimacy, achievement, power, and beauty. These things are not evil, but they are fleeting. Each time a desire is satisfied, another one surfaces. The meal fills us, then hunger returns. Praise lifts us, then the silence afterward feels heavier. Success soothes us, then the fear of losing it gnaws at us from within. What looks like a path to fulfillment becomes a cycle that never ends. The moment of joy disappears, and we are left scrambling for the next one. Kant saw this cycle as a kind of servitude, an endless obedience to appetite. It is not the individual who rules over their desires, but the desires that rule over the individual. And this dependence makes us fragile. If your happiness rests on wealth, what happens when fortune shifts? If it rests on beauty, what happens when time alters your face? If it rests on love, what happens when the person you need is gone? Even if you gather all these treasures, they remain exposed to decay and chance. The pursuit of happiness ties your sense of worth to the unstable ground of circumstance. Kant's warning was clear. To build your life on happiness is to build on sand. Pleasure is a hostage to luck. Desire is a leash we gladly wear, mistaking it for freedom. And in this way, happiness becomes dangerous. Not because it is wicked, but because it deceives us. It convinces us that we are living freely, when in truth we are being dragged along by cravings, like a ship at the mercy of shifting winds. The deeper problem, Kant believed, was not just the instability of happiness, but its power to distract us from what truly matters. Pleasure tells us, you have arrived. You are fulfilled. But in Kant's eyes, this was a mirage, a trick of the mind to keep us from asking the harder question: what should I do? Happiness answers what we want. Morality asks what we ought. And Kant thought the two often stand opposed. This is the trap of desire. It offers us sweetness, but at the cost of our freedom. It places our lives in the hands of impulse, leaving us vulnerable, restless, never complete. What we call happiness, Kant thought, might actually be the most elegant form of slavery ever devised, because it is a cage we willingly enter, smiling as the lock clicks shut. If happiness is so unstable, then what should guide us? For Kant, the answer was duty. A hard word, almost archaic, but to him, it was the only ground firm enough to stand on. He believed that morality had to exist beyond moods, beyond desires, beyond the shifting tides of circumstance. And the moment we tie morality to pleasure, we corrupt it. Think of it this way. Imagine helping a stranger on the street. If you did it because it gave you joy, Kant would argue that your act is not purely moral. Why? Because it was guided by feeling, not by principle. If the day comes when helping no longer makes you happy, when it costs you, when it feels inconvenient, then your morality evaporates. Pleasure is fickle, and therefore any morality built on it will collapse the moment it no longer feels rewarding. For Kant, a moral action has to come from duty alone, from respect for what he called the moral law. That law is not written in books or decreed by governments. It is carved into reason itself, an inner command that says, act only according to a rule you could will for everyone to follow. This is the categorical imperative, a command that does not ask whether it makes you happy or whether it benefits you, but only whether it could hold universally for anyone in any circumstance. This is why Kant distrusted happiness. He saw it as a smokescreen that clouds our judgment, tempting us to act for comfort instead of principle. Happiness whispers, do this because it feels good. Duty answers, do this because it is right. And these two voices are not always in harmony. Kant's world is stark. Imagine a friend knocking on your door, fleeing someone who intends to kill them. A murderer soon arrives and asks where your friend is hiding. Most people would say, lie. Lying, in this case, saves a life and spares suffering, surely the happy outcome. But Kant would not bend. His moral law forbids lying, no matter the consequence. To him, once you make morality dependent on results, on what makes people happier, you have destroyed its foundation. You have made it conditional, subjective, negotiable. And here lies Kant's greatest tension. Morality, as he conceived it, was cold, unyielding, almost brutal. It demands we act out of duty even when it brings us pain, even when happiness pleads with us to do otherwise. For Kant, this severity was not cruelty, but purity. A morality that flexes to satisfy desire is not morality at all. This is why happiness, in his view, was dangerous. It lures us into thinking we are moral when we are only comfortable. It convinces us that doing what feels good is the same as doing what is right. But for Kant, the two must be separated, because pleasure is a weak foundation, and morality must stand like stone. In the end, Kant's vision strips morality of its warmth. It becomes a duty carried out without expectation of reward, without any promise of joy. And perhaps that was his point. If morality is to have any dignity, it must shine even in the absence of happiness, even in the dark. We usually imagine freedom as the power to do whatever we want, to choose without restraint, to follow desire wherever it leads. But for Kant, this was not freedom at all. It was simply another mask for slavery. Because if our choices are driven only by appetite, by pleasure, by the pursuit of happiness, then we are not truly free. We are captives of impulse, carried along by forces we do not control. Kant's definition of freedom was far stranger and far harsher. To him, freedom meant the ability to act according to reason, to obey the moral law within, even when it clashes with what we want. The paradox is sharp. You are only free when you are bound by duty. To do what you desire may feel liberating, but it is actually servitude. To do what you ought, what duty demands, is the only act that reveals autonomy. This is the chain Kant offers us. A chain that does not confine from the outside, but restrains from within. The moral law binds us, but in binding us, it sets us free. Because it is no longer pleasure or fear or circumstance dictating our choices, but reason itself. Something universal, something untouchable by chance. And yet, this vision is deeply unsettling. It asks us to reject the sweetness of following our impulses, and instead to embrace a freedom that feels like obedience. Kant thought this obedience was not to an external authority, not to rulers or traditions, but to something higher, reason itself, echoing as the categorical imperative. Still, the effect is the same. We are not at liberty to do whatever we want. We are called to obey, even against ourselves. This is why Kant thought happiness was dangerous. It tricks us into believing we are free, when we are only following invisible chains. The smile, the comfort, the thrill of satisfaction, all of it hides the fact that we are ruled by desire. For him, only in turning away from this, only in surrendering to duty, could we finally step into genuine freedom. If happiness is fragile, deceptive, and dangerous, what remains? What can give life meaning when desire enslaves us and duty strips us of comfort? Kant's answer was stark: the sublime. For Kant, the sublime was not ordinary beauty. Beauty pleases us. The sublime overwhelms us. It is the feeling of standing before something vast and terrifying. Mountains that dwarf us, storms that threaten us, the endless night sky that makes us feel like dust. These experiences are not happy in the conventional sense. They unsettle us, shake us, even frighten us. Yet in their enormity, they awaken something deeper. The realization that we are more than creatures of desire. When you stand before the vastness of nature, Kant argued, you discover your smallness, but also your dignity. You realize that while your body is vulnerable, your reason is not. A storm can crush you, but it cannot break the moral law within you. The stars can stretch into infinite distance, but they cannot touch your freedom to obey duty. This confrontation with the sublime reveals a higher kind of meaning, one that does not depend on pleasure, luck, or circumstance, but on the strength of our rational and moral nature. This is why Kant placed such weight on two things: the starry heavens above me and the moral law within me. These were not sources of happiness, but of awe. They connected human beings to something larger than themselves, something unshakable. Happiness fades, pleasure crumbles, but dignity endures. The sublime reminds us that our worth does not lie in fleeting joy, but in our capacity to rise above it. And here Kant offers his final replacement for happiness. Not comfort, but reverence. Not satisfaction, but awe. Life, in his view, is not about feeling good, but about becoming worthy. Kant warned us, happiness can be a cage disguised as freedom. What we chase may not be what truly matters. If you found something here worth questioning, subscribe to Loom, because the pursuit of philosophy never ends, and neither do the illusions we live under.